Right. So, welcome everyone to this session. I'm really looking forward to it. This is termed the key to sustainable, future-proof building portfolio management. I'm from Building Mind. Building Mind is a corporate startup. Main investor is Schindler, or sole investor, as it were. And we have a great technology partner on the other side with Microsoft. Well, I guess we've been around, launched about a year and a half ago or so, and are now in the journey of building our real estate data-driven asset performance management platform. So that was a long word, that was a mouthful, but I think you get the idea. So what I'd like to do is then now step through and take a second look at the digital twin. Maybe just on the session, I'd like to keep this as informal as possible. So please feel free to comment, use the chat, or hop on stage. That's also great. I mean, that would be good. And also, I'm used to maybe seeing the people I'm interacting with. I can't do that here. So if I'm talking gibberish, or if my audio is gone, then you'll have to let me know. Otherwise, I have absolutely no other way of knowing. So that would be great. So let's get started. So let's just try this out. Right, so I've posted a question in the chat. So it'd be great if you could take a quick look, and I would actually be very interested to see what the answer is to that. And maybe up front, to be honest, I don't think there's a right or a wrong answer here. I am sure, are many different ways you can answer this, but it would also give a few insights as to where people's thinking is, where their minds are. So I'll wait for just 1 second, because I'm not sure whether it's findable. Could be.
Who else has ideas?
So the question is that I put there is, what was the first digital twin? And actually, to be honest, this could also be an opinion rather than a fact. And I think there could be some interest in that. Yeah, I like that. C64, one of a car. Well, I guess transport. I guess that comes close to what I was thinking. I'll, make it a bit more and whatever.
Whoa.
That was, so I'm just wondering, has somebody done a sneak preview, or is that what popped up? So we already have the answer there, actually. So what we can see here is, one of the simulation rules from Apollo 13. And that was actually exactly the opinion I was going to pose here. And the point is really, so Apollo 13 was the mission to go to the moon, but the one that failed. So Apollo 11 was the one which succeeded. Apollo 13 did not. And what happened is they're a couple hundred miles over the Earth, and there was a big bang. And at that point, something went awfully wrong. So Houston, we have a problem. And, it's one of those topics when you're a couple hundred miles, 100,000 miles, sorry, from home. It's quite scary. And the question is, how can you address this problem? How can you go about figuring out what to do and, get the information together to figure out the correct course of action? And what they actually had was about, 15 simulators. And this is, a combination of, maybe it's a console, you've got, a bunch of computers, you have programs running, which allowed them in parallel to simulate various courses of action, continuously take input from what was happening up in the sky, and predict what might be the best thing to happen. Oxygen was leaking, and the boosters, or the main propulsion system was not really working properly. And amazingly enough, it worked. And so one of the points is it's also a very, very complex situation to manage and look at, and you're very far away from the actual physical situation. And this was a real key, using the digital twin in the situation to master that. And miraculously enough, it all went well. So, you know, the term, though, digital twin, was not around then. A guy called Michael Greaves, I think there are different opinions on this, but, I would put out there that this was one of the first times it was really coined as a phrase. The first time it happened might have been about 50 years ago. This is going back about 20 years ago. I thought of terms like doppelganger or whatever before. And he said, well, in my mind, a digital twin, you need a physical asset, you need a digital representation, and you connect these. And the connection is data. Now, I think if you look around today, it's obvious. There are many different digital twins, and they're in use. Right? Energy, smart cities, GE have about 500,000 different digital twins. So it's actually becoming quite pervasive in very many parts of our world today. And I think the other point is that in a lot of cases, especially the ones here, we're talking about product lifecycle management. In other words, using the information to really see how you can improve a product. So you simulate the behavior, you take in real data, and you can then really adapt different situations and see, what might need to be improved. So that's all good and fine. So this sounds great. So everybody must be doing it. If you throw up a few analysis of the market, the whole topic of digitization, real estate isn't really doing great as an industry. So it doesn't really matter. These are some random polls, and the unanimous result is it's somewhere down the bottom end of the stack. And some might ask, well, so what? Is that really an issue? Why not? It seems to be going well. Why bother? And I think if you look at some things happening today, it gives us a hint as to why it is worthwhile thinking about digitization and thinking about the topic around digital twins. COVID-19, we all know it. It's impacted our lives. It'll change the social fabric in many countries. It changes the way we interact with each other. It changes the way we interact with the world around us. And I don't mean just because we're in home office and like this, so we have to do remote sessions. But the way we use real estate as well is going to change. Office space, we need to be flexible. We need to monitor it. We need to check how many people are around, and are we compliant? Are we overcrowding? Can we trace back? Can we, if there's been an incident? Many questions around there. Now, whilst the infection rate is like exponential, so simple mathematical formula, addressing it is complex. And in that case, just like in the Apollo 13 case, using a representation of what's happening, a digital representation, is one of the keys to help to address it. And the other point here is it's not just about, a social issue, it's also a huge impact on the economy. We see it every day, tickers, another, 10 billion, another 20 billion gone, 100 billion here, 100 billion there, all to prop up what's happening in the economy. So if that weren't bad enough, once we've dealt with that, we still have the issue we were grappling with before, which hasn't gone away, the topic of climate change. And here again, we have a hugely complex situation which needs to be addressed. Sure, today we use simulations, which in some way is a digital twin to predict weather. We do things like try to model the climate, but that is really just trying to gain insights. Question is thinking about, what the impact will be in the future if we look at, carbon footprinting and the impact on the economy, the impact on real estate, and what we need to do. We need to somehow interact. And if you look at what role buildings play in all of this, it's huge. And it doesn't matter whether we're looking at the materials which are used, whether we're looking at the energy which is consumed, or if we're simply looking at other emissions from around what's done. They play a great role. So being able to find a way to actually not just see what's happening, but predict, and then also change your actions accordingly will be hugely important if we're actually going to address those issues. And as we will see, this is one proposition, for example, where a digital twin can play a role. In other words, using data, connecting it with the real world, and then deducing insights to be able to make sensible actions, to make sure it's economical, to make sure it's ecological, and make sure it suits for the people who need to live and use these buildings. So from that point, I believe it is really important that in the real estate industry, we think about this and actually address the issue head on. Now, I think, if we've seen about, 50-year-old digital twin, we've seen the term, coined 20 years ago, we've seen a whole bunch of different topics in the industry. The question is, going back to the real estate and coming back to what we're doing, what does that mean? So I'm going to get really tactical for a minute. And try and give a very, let's say, just a very hands-on view of what our interpretation of the digital twin is.
Can I just
and relate it also
shortly interrupt you? Yep. There's Bastian. He wants to join the panel, and I couldn't let him in. Bastian, if you like, just try again, and Duncan can let you in, I guess.
Yep, I'll try.
Genau. That would be cool. And anyone, please feel free to join, to comment, to ask questions in the chat. So we're really looking forward to receiving feedback, questions, additions.
Absolutely. Yep. So I'll try. I think, when I'm staring at my screen, looking at what's happening there, I can miss the things which are happening. So thanks, Katerina. So, coming back to, the real estate, I think the relevance is clear. So how do we interpret that? What do we mean when we're talking about a digital building twin? And in our case, really what we're thinking about is not just the architectural view, so the space, but in particular also the equipment which is inside. We mean also the documents which relates to a building, the area. An area, really what that's about is like net area, gross area, lettable area, and also maybe different standards can be used to actually measure the area. And sensors, of course, as we've seen in the case of, how do we easily relate the physical asset to the digital asset. And that is together what we would coin the digital building twin. So diving down into that, if you look at the top level sort of architectural structural view, you've got the building. Really, that's sort of, your location. That's could be something like, the address and the master data. Master data could include things like, purchase price. It would be, the base area that it has. Thinking about the way you might use this would be your logbook, your passbook, your building, your building passport, if you like. And taking it further, as we'll see, it's our single source of truth for what the building is. Of course, within the building, we have floors. We've got the individual spaces. These are the rooms. And really at that level, when we're looking at the building twin, we're talking about use cases which govern things like space management, equipment management. By that, what I mean is, just, what equipment is there. So having a list of, for example, all of the, fire equipment, HVAC, and the relevant master data to that. And a part of the whole architectural part of our digital twin is, of course, the visualization. Most cases, as we know, this is a 2D representation if we're lucky. So we might have something like a layout. But there are cases, of course, where we have a 3D visualization. In addition, we also call this the opportunity to have a home for a BIM model. And this is really where you can take maybe what you had from the planning and build phase and allow it to live on. So instead of having that break as you go from the build to operate, you provide a home for the BIM model. And important is, of course, the master data. So it's not just about that 3D model. And in fact, I would tend that that's probably not the most important part, but it's the master data you gain with it. And bringing it in means you can actually make it live, you can keep it up to date, and you can actually have that as an initial core for a digital twin. So second point on the visualization relates to maybe further use cases you can spin off it. Points of interest is nothing more than being able to place a pinpoint somewhere in that 3D visualization and essentially associate information with it. This could be something like, a fire extinguisher. It could be a fire door. It could be an elevator. It could be HVAC, whatever it is. And you can associate that master data exactly with that point of interest. Off that, of course, you can spin things like how do you keep the building information up to date. People can walk through it with, mobile devices. And what you can also do is basically use that really to, create the interactive use cases that you have. So if we then take that, of course, a part of the whole topic would be the equipment digital twin. So this is really the representation of the equipment in the building. So you've spoken about you can have anything from just a list to maybe a full representation. And this is where you might associate IoT data or sensor data with that particular asset. And other things like, activities management and documentation, helping really to manage that equipment and also make sure that any obligations you have that you're managing to, keep those under control. So obligation management, for example. And maybe if we go back to that first picture I showed of all the digital twins, many of those play in that where we have things like, predictive maintenance, we have things like asset optimization. And the last part when you're talking about within the building would be the integration of sensor data as a whole. So really this would be, not really where we're talking about a particular equipment which is sending information, but this could be additional things like footfall cameras, which would allow you to monitor people in the building. This allows you to do things like, optimization of spaces. And when you're taking that, this was where things like the COVID-19 monitoring can come in as well. I just seen it sort of pop up. I think Simon popped something up. So what would the biggest challenges be to incorporate a building structure information for new, especially existing, if possible, building structure health monitoring systems, right? Yeah, so I mean, great point, Simon. So I think I will in part, address one of the points to that, because, you quite rightly said, if you look at the buildings today, you know, they're not digitized, right? You'd be lucky to have some plans, and you'd be very lucky if they're already up to date. So I'll talk to that a bit, of how you would incorporate and grow that, and what role it plays. Okay, and then maybe once I've gone through, I think it'd be great to then come back to that question, or maybe you'd want to pop on and comment and clarify what you might want. So this, of course, all of what I said is, you know, more or less, if you like, the maximum, you know, extent when you're talking, you have all that. And I also mentioned, and I'll just quickly note on this, because it plays a huge role in a number of different use cases which you have around real estate management. It's documents, right? So that's just, could be simple documentation of equipment in the building, maintenance, of course, maintenance documentation, but also things like, you know, manuals or certifications, certificates and stuff like that. And having that in there, what we can do is essentially classify and extract information of those documents once they're on the platform. The use case, just as an example, would be when you're thinking about, you know, transactioning. So once you have that in the twin, it means you essentially have a data room, and, you know, creating these is a pain, right? So essentially, from the you know, customers we've spoken to, they say every time they recreate it, and that's expensive, it costs time, and they're basically looking for information which was once there, but has simply got lost. So, right, the digital building twin has different sizes. So this is really thinking about the maturity and where you are, what kind of a building it is. On the left, you would have, you know, t-shirt size small. T-shirt size small means, well, we kind of know exactly where it is. We have an address, and we might have some key master data about it, but maybe not much more. And if you go through, you know, through the different sizes to M, L, X, XL, what's happening is you're augmenting the data which is associated with that, and creating a richer digital representation. That goes all the way down to, of course, the topic of having, you know, full, you know, 3D, 2D plans, you know, technical facilities, and everything that we saw previously. The key is, though, is that just is not necessary and is not present in the vast majority of cases. So what we believe will happen is we'll probably start with an S. For most portfolios, there might be one building in there which is an L or an XL, if you look at maybe most companies. But that doesn't matter for a number of reasons. The first is, if you look at technology, it's taking us to the right-hand side, right? Sensors are being introduced. Buildings are being renovated. We can see, you know, a lot out there which is basically making it possible to rescan buildings and actually create 2D or 3D representations of buildings, and will really help in the future to land further on the right-hand side. Important though, that's not necessary and will not be available in the vast majority of cases. And, you know, the second aspect about the, you know, digital twin is, you know, how it acts. So I think I said single source of truth. And if you look at the diagram, the one on the left, right, it looks a bit like, you know, a bit like a network diagram. It's point to point. And the issue here is, you know, information is traveling between all the different, if you like, all the different stakeholders. So that's a tenant, an owner, asset managers, facility managers, portfolio managers, you know, of course, all the providers, service providers which interact, and they're exchanging documents, information, emails about the building, some of it which is relevant, reports. You know, a service provider might keep it, send a copy to a facility manager, And when they change, that's lost. You've lost that history. You've lost those interactions. It's gone. And it also has a second issue, which is if you want to be up to date, that's difficult. You know, it's always circulating somewhere in that orbit. So getting a timely view of where you're at and a transparent one, as an owner, is very difficult in that case. A lot of phone calls, emails, whatever, to get that together. Which, if you look at the right-hand side, having the digital twin as the single source of truth, as it were, for these interactions enables that to happen a lot easier, enables that information to be captured, and also allows the owner to have a timely, more transparent view of the building.
Can I ask you a question about it? It's this twin and the picture as you draw it. What would you think is the biggest pain point that, let's say, portfolio managers or even, I don't know, property managers have? Because you're mentioning a lot of stuff, and this graphic looks in a way simple, but in the end there is a lot behind it, I guess.
Right.
So according to your experience with partners, is there a biggest pain point, or is there a lot of pain points?
I mean, there are many different ones. The one this one talks to, of course, is a lot around data silos. Right. So essentially, if you think about it, each of those pots is creating a data silo, and for many of the use cases and business opportunities that for digital customers are looking for, they would love to have more up-to-date insights to be able to have data-driven decisions about optimizing the financials, optimizing their space. But that's not possible at the moment, or seeing where they're at with their obligation management. Those things are simply not possible to do in the left-hand side, or they're expensive. If we, and there's a comment here from Menno, of course, the topic, life cycle management. Yep, is absolutely a huge opportunity with this respect. Now, I guess that's really the core twin, if you like. But I think real opportunities lie with a couple of other further points. So I think I've just spent a lot of time simply saying the digital twin, as we say it, is not just a 3D representation, but incorporates all these other elements. That's kind of the takeaway from that chunk, right? That was a long way around of saying that. But really taking it and to go to the next step, we've augmented that digital twin with additional information. We've used the common data model. This is also maybe a term coined by Microsoft. They originally basically published their own model around customer relationship management. They created an open data initiative with SAP and Adobe. And really the whole point here is about creating industry-specific open data models, right? I've put down just some clusters here, tenant, finance, energy, and these really focus around information which has come from other systems, could be third party, or could just be something like, the ERP system, could be something like an SAP, or, lease management, could be Plano, whatever it is. But, they would really feed in to this augmented information. It brings in the additional transactional information onto the digital twin. And, maybe just as a look feel point, of course, what can you do? You can, of course, use this information, you can analyze it, and one visual way of analyzing, showing the results of any analysis you've done under the hood is dashboard. So now you can have, finance dashboards which relate to your physical assets, is navigatable and relatable to that, and is structured around it. So you always have that same viewpoint, regardless of, what kind of information it is and where it's coming from. Property management dashboards, again, another great one for optimizing the properties. And maybe the last one, which relates most to, those first slides I showed, is sustainability dashboard. Of course, is one where, you might be taking information. This could be things like information from smart meters, but it could be Excel, right? If you're looking at a global portfolio, the whole bag will be there of different kinds of sources of information. Being able to create some kind of uniform platform within which to put that and then drive these insights off is, of course, the cornerstone. Now, taking that, one building is great, but that's a little bit, that would be too short, right? And so it's really when you join the dots and, make a whole, join all these digital twins, which are currently, silos in many cases, together, that you create something which can bring value. I think a couple of ways of looking at this, if you look at something like a patient record on paper, yep, great. At least you have the history. You come back, they can say, yep, that's what's happened. Digitizing that, okay, well, that's not bad. It allows you to maybe share the information. You can back it up. You can travel with you. But really, if you think of where big things changed around the patient care is, having patient databases. Now you can create insights across all the, you can deploy AI and machine learning to really have far different and deeper learnings about, trends and about what's happening. Again, maps, similar thing. They're great. Just putting them as a digital format, which initially happened as pictures, also good. It's easier. You can have them on multiple platforms. But the value comes from taking metadata and associating it, knowing that a road is a road, having the geolocations and therefore being able to calculate distances, having addresses in there. Now you can do other things with that. Of course, you can associate further information like traffic information, right? And, if you look at somebody like Uber, they mastered the art of really saying, take information, analyze it. The amount of number crunching they do in the background on the platform is immense. And they've created a whole business model around that. So I think that's really about, when you say, well, why should we connect these digital twins? I think that should just help the imagination take that further. What we call that is, the portfolio twin, if you like, right? So this is, the connected individual digital building twins. And now you can really compare, you can benchmark. This creates the first foundation of being able to really look at the patterns in your business and, look over, where do you want to invest, where do you not want to invest, where are you doing great, where not, and then be able to really target the resources where they're needed, right? And that's based on data insights in order to make those decisions. Right, I'm just going to take a quick check. There have been a couple of questions here on the chat since I popped up. Anything new?
Quick answer on one of the questions regarding our presentation. We were told that we might receive the addresses of the participants after the event. However, if you're really interested and want to get in touch, maybe even earlier than that, send us an email at info@buildingminds.com. You can even find that address on the website, of course, and then we can get in touch with you earlier than that.
Okay. Yep. Thank you, Katerina. So we've come to the portfolio, and I think this is maybe a good place. I think, Menno asked the question, would this affect the evaluation? And yes, that's a great question. We believe yes. If you take maybe just two examples, something like the data room having a seamless history of an asset and being able to transaction it easier would be one example, because you not only save the cost of recreating it, you have greater confidence in the information. And like in many things, it's like having your service history of your car. That, of course, increases the valuation and the value of that. Other things like, being able to steer things like insurance better, more targeted. That might be a second one. So there are different ways, or in sustainability, essentially, being able to say, look, here I also have the history of that. So I have my passport of the buildings as a portfolio. Yes, we're carbon neutral, we can prove this, and here we have it, and it's present. So there are many different things which play into that. And ultimately, this will quite clearly affect the valuation. If it's simply because they're easier and more attractive when it comes to actually something to buy, or whether it's actually in the operations is something, of course, we don't know, but we believe so from the feedback we've had. Right, and I think there's maybe another thing from Jeffrey about the twins and looking at it. So are we, what are we doing and connecting them? Maybe one aspect here is, we're thinking in a first instance to collect and aggregate. So we are system agnostic, we're hardware agnostic. So it's really collecting that together and allowing that data to be associated with the building, being able to run the analysis and then feed insights back. So for example, our first target is not to command and control, all these twins. That might be, and the second is, it's not our aim to replace a building management system. That's not what this is about, okay? So I don't know whether that helps. That was some from Jeffrey. Right, so I'll come back, quickly jump back here again then. So the portfolio is where we landed. We've gone from individual twins, and we have a whole portfolio of them. And this is really the answer. Yes, one is great. You can do a lot with a single building. Taking additional information and feeding that in and being able to do create these other insights, of course, is the next step. But ultimately, connecting them all together is where you create the real business value for an asset manager or for an owner. And, how do we think about this as a journey? How do we get there? What are aspects about this twin? So if you look at the augmentation, I dropped the name Common Data Model earlier on. And this, again, important, is an open data standard or a data model for real estate. And it sits in between, if you like, the data coming in and the insights you want to generate. It acts a bit like an interface to the outside world. It creates that common information, communication, as well as common data platform from which you can then create dashboards, custom dashboards, and deploy AI, use smart algorithms. Simply because if you have to, in each case, for each BMS system, for each SAP system, for each lease management system, for each CAFN system, if you had to really think each time about how to model that and bring that into a system, you end up recreating silos within your consolidation platform. So it's a key concept to have that underlying. And sharing it is, of course, another key concept, right? That being open. That's something we firmly believe, and this is where we have created the IBPDI, slick off the tongue. So that's the International Building Performance and Data Initiative. We created this with the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. They have their own IBOS, International Building Operating standards, that of course is finding its way, and that's very much around KPIs. We're driving, performance in real estate. We've partnered with Microsoft, we already spoke about providing the technology and around CDM, and Pomplast, a great partner, bringing in insights from the industry. And we are doing this because we believe the industry requires an open standard if it wants to move forwards, right? If it wants to actually reap the benefits of any kind of digitization and harvest that, it is a key, right? It's integrating the data models and the KPI is a big point. We're looking to bring this to the public this year. And of course, we're well aware it's a big task, right? It's a mountain of a task. But luckily, we're very confident we have, the right tools. Our rucksack's packed. We have everything there. And that's a great starting point. And of course, we're doing it with great partners. At the end of the day, though, we know that we're not going to drive it alone. And we also know that if we're going to do it, we will need to team up. So this is an invite to join us to reimagine the digital building twin, to really help the real estate industry create an open standard in order that it can reap the benefits of digitization.
There are a couple of questions, pretty cool ones. Have a look.
Okay. So I think there are a couple which I've spoke to. Right, so we can take evaluation we've taken. I think there was one about replacing Bms Systems. I think I've answered that. So I think that was also Jeffrey. So we don't replace the Bms system, we integrate into it. Simply because replacing what's there doesn't scale, and it's also very building specific. And ultimately, it's really connecting it at the portfolio level where you believe the ultimate value is going to be created. So what else do we have here? Disparate building systems, access control, fans, cooling, fade, etc. Does that create an ease of starting or a specific strategy for starting a digital twin model from the beginning, the design process? I think I touched on this, how we can integrate this from the beginning. And if you think about BIM models, if of course we have the information from the start, then of course you can also build bottom up. So that's, I think, is, and again, we will see both scenarios happening, top down and bottom up. We firmly believe both will happen as time progresses. What can you give real estate owners so that they will use a digital twin the entire life cycle of the buildings and their environment? Well, I guess the question is why should they really? And, I hope, a couple of the points I mentioned at the beginning provide a little bit of a backdrop. I think it's when you intertwine that with the benefits you can derive that I think when you're looking at the owners who really they're looking at the impact that it has on their P&L, that it's at that level that we will need to be thinking. And it's really why should they? So we've seen things like COVID-19, we've seen things like climate change, carbon. There are a lot coming now with the topic of sustainability. It's simply not doable on Excel. You cannot do it. And you certainly cannot make sure that you hit the target. And I think that's a huge motivator we've seen, because the cost ultimately, if you work out what your surplus carbon will be, if you miss it and you're not neutral at your target date, it's expensive, right? Hundreds of thousands, talking about individual assets in 30 years will just be lost. So I think it's those points which I think are really the ones which ultimately will help bring in the real motivation. and help facilitate. What benefit would there be to more precise plug-load data modeling and design? So Katerina, maybe if you could, you might need to clarify, or Catherine, sorry, it might be, if you could maybe clarify or turn on your audio, that would help. Chuck, so the value can be emphasized during the sale purchase of the building, right? We can understand the concept better. In the example of buying a used car, airplane, or boats, if every maintenance and operations action were digitized in a digital record that cannot be manipulated, right? Via blockchain, for example, the buyer's due diligence effort is significant. Exactly, Chuck. Thank you. Right, that I think was the point when I sort of mentioned the transactioning your building passport. That's exactly the point. And it really allows that ability. What's the biggest barrier at the moment to create the ultimate digital twin for the European market? I think that's probably partly in the world ultimate digital twin. So the digital twin, again, is a tool and a toolkit. It's not really a means to an end. And I think on that, really, if you think about that, we will see different digital twins arising. However, when you're looking at the real estate, one of the biggest blockers is really having that common view. What is a building? What are these assets? How do you describe them? The metadata. How do you measure them? And having some agreement of what they are. Because especially if you look at any kind of global organization or even a European organization, you have different standards, you have different measures, you have, different levels. And if you cannot bring those onto one common view, then you will always fail. Because when you come to the next building, the frustration will be there from the start. Look, I have my view of my digital building, but this new one's come along and they have a new standard, they have whatever it is, and I can't integrate it. And all of a sudden, you're creating the next silo. So I think that's a huge, if you look at the technical side and just the logistics, that's a huge one. Also just the lack of available digitization at the moment. But I think we'll see this change because what will happen is, if you want to, for example, use a standard, carbon calculation model, you'll need to have your information in some kind of a standard to be able to profit from that. Then it's a motivating factor to actually move towards that. So, Menno, I hope that's, gives some of the points that we've certainly seen. Right, so I think, let me just see, is anybody still here? Right, yeah, okay, people, yep, so people are still in. Anybody care to take the stage or bring in a comment? I'd really love to have any kind of feedback or comments. I love the comments in the chat, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Catherine just wrote that it's more kind of a separate discussion potentially because it's a bit more complex.
Okay, yep, no problems. And again, so I mean, if you would like to continue the discussion, yep, love to. I think partnering here is key. So that's something we've seen really, that a number of of our partners and customers, they've actually tried to do some of this themselves. And what happens is they start off and they start investing, they start consolidating, bringing the platforms, and the cost rises. And what they've ended up doing is building their own platform, but then that's not interoperable. So then when the next system comes along, the next building, or you buy another company, you have no ready means to integrate it because that's been built within itself. So having the open standard is a way we believe, if we want to really allow the real estate industry to reap the benefits of digitization, then it's a key. And that's maybe another hint, why would they not digitize today? It's because, how they can't see a way which they can really get that, the returns for their invest.
Here's another one. Jeffrey.
Okay. Yep. Jeffrey, so plug load smart meters. We have smart electric meters in a building we commissioned in 2018, and it gives you all sorts of use data that can benefit. Right, exactly. So, yep, Jeffrey, smart metering again will play a role in this. So it's again one of the ways, as you say, which can help to keep the digital representation up to date, right? And I think, you know, things like energy consumption monitoring and the whole topic around sustainability will benefit from this and having things like that available. So here again, we work together with partners who can help us really create an integration to the ready systems. We're not going to do that work ourselves, right? We'd like to remain agnostic so that when a customer has a host of different, you know, if you're looking at a global company, then they will have a different company, be it in China or be it somewhere on the other side of the continent, to in Europe. But again, it must fit into that same portfolio view. Otherwise, you lose those real benefits. All right, so I'll allow myself to take a quick sip of water and pause there. So Katarina, thanks. Okay. Oh, what do we do with the data? Thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you for that. Great question. I think there are different aspects to this. So maybe to make it very clear, we believe the customer's data belongs to the customer. We do not use that data for anything ourselves, right? So the data is stored obviously securely, separated and segregated. It's encrypted for that customer and is solely used for the purposes of, you know, showing what I showed, the access to the application. The, you know, obviously the customer can choose to share that data. So we have a concept whereby you can share data, you can actually invite people to collaborate on your digital twin so that they don't have to copy it or take copies away with that. But ultimately, it's you know, securely stored and is completely separated, you know, tenant separation for that purposes. I'm not sure whether that answers the question, but maybe it does. It's stored in the cloud. I think that was it. How do you organize and store it? Right, exactly. Yep, absolutely. Key point. You know, we're up to date with that. We'll work with our partners, Microsoft as well, making sure we actually are leading edge as far as how we manage that. So I'll pause for a minute so that anything else comes up. Okay, so I think we're done. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining, and let your imagination go. I would encourage you to do that, and I think Katarina, you can follow up with anyone who contacts us.
Exactly, we will do so, right? And pass by at our little booth that we have. You should see in the Tab Expo. And there we are. So feel free to drop us a question there or info at whatever you prefer. Lovely to keep talking to you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Have a great day. Enjoy the rest of it.
Bye.
Bye.
Ciao.